Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Children's Scrutiny Panel meeting. Item 1, membership of the committee. If we just have brief introductions. My name is Cathal Burke. I chair the Children's Scrutiny Panel.
I'm Yolanda Myers. I'm the Governance Officer that supports the panel.
Amanda Pinnock, Councillor.
Dale O'Neill, Volunteer Co-op Tea.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy that the minutes of the meeting held on 29th January are accurate? Yep. Item 3, interests. If any members have any interest, fill out the relevant form and hand it in after the meeting. Item 4, admission of the public. There's no items to be taken in private, so the meeting will be held in public. Item 5 is the proposals for changes to home-to-school transport policy for children attending mainstream school. So members of the committee will consider the previously circulated Cabinet report relating to changes to home-to-school transport. Has everybody got the relevant papers for this item? 5. Okay, thank you. And I think Joanne Bartholomew will take us through this. Thank you.
Good morning. What I propose to do is to just take you through the report at a high level and then I'll answer any questions. So the report was part of a set of reports following a consultation with parents, schools and other affected people regarding both school transport for mainstream children, so that's generally what we refer to as bus passes, and school transport for children with special educational needs. There were 2 reports taken on the same day. This particular report that's here before you today is for mainstream transport and therefore is what we would refer to as bus pass children. So the report was brought to Cabinet as part of the previous budget round last year for us to look at how we were applying aspects of policy. There is national guidance surrounding the home-to-school transport legislation, which is detailed in the report, which basically changes some of the criteria dependent on the age of the child and the miles distance from the child's home address to their school. There are some aspects that also impact, such as safe walking routes, etc. But in general, there is an age criteria and a mileage criteria. One of the things that the government makes parents aware of is that they should look to check whether or not the authority is using geographical or catchment. So in particular, this report placed before Cabinet a number of options. One was for Cabinet to stay as it was with the current criteria, which allowed children to go with catchment, but also had some circumstances, particularly around the middle schools and the Honley and Home Firth areas, where parents could potentially get a bus pass for not their catchment school. The second option was to remove the anomaly from things like the Home Firth and Honley catchment, so you had to apply for your catchment. And the third option was to do what a number of councils already do, which is to remove the catchment as being the main criteria and place the geographical nearest school as being the criteria. That would mean that parents would, in the selection process for high school or junior school for their child, would need to be aware of the mileage distance between their home address and their catchment and their geographical school. The report had a number of recommendations around moving to geographical. It in particular made Cabinet aware of the fact that the middle school pyramid is somewhat complex in this area and will need further work. But it did recommend that if Cabinet wished to make a saving, that we could move to the geographical criteria. And Cabinet considered the matter. They've moved to the geographical criteria. There has been a change to the recommendations within the report. Cabinet felt that children who were already in the system as of September 18 this year, so whatever, should not have it retrospectively applied to them. So technically, if you have a bus pass for a school in September of this year, that will remain with you whilst ever you remain at that school or remain at that home address. Okay. I'm happy to take any questions for clarification.
Panel members got any questions this time?
Thank you.
Anything further to add from panel members? And we've got some panel members who've just arrived, so perhaps we give you an opportunity to catch up. Is there anything further you want to add to this, or just in summary for the members who've just arrived?
In summary, the report requires us to bring forward a new policy for mainstream home-to-school transport, as well as the secondary report that's not here before you today required us to bring forward a policy for SEND. So there'll be a policy coming forward which will be implementable from September 2019. One of the key criteria that officers will have to ensure happens is during the selection processes for schools in the autumn and spring of next year, that parents are aware of what their preferences mean in terms of their eligibility for assistance with transport.
Okay. Would it be possible then to bring the policy back at some stage before September 2019?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine to bring the policy back through scrutiny.
Okay. Any panel members wish to comment or add anything to that? No? Okay. Thank you very much. We're just going to have a break because we're waiting for some officers to arrive, which should be in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're moving on to agenda item 6. Which is special education needs and disabilities. And this is where members of the committee will consider an update on current work being done around special education needs and disabilities. And we've got Mandy and Joanne to take us through this item. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. So it's a very brief report, as you can see, and I thought I'd furnish you with more detail at the time. This needs to be taken in conjunction with the high needs review that we are undertaking currently. That is something that we've been, all local authorities have been required to do from the DFE. Fundamentally to release a very small amount of capital funding, but what we've used it as an opportunity for really taking a root and branches look at the whole system in terms of how we include and meet the needs of children and young people with special educational needs. And that you will be hearing more and more about that as we move forward, because it's going to form a big part of our strategy and will inevitably feed into this. However, in terms of the preparation for the inspection itself, we have a self-evaluation form that is a constantly updated document. It's got scribble all over it, as you would expect, because things change on an almost weekly basis. And all of those partners, because this is an area inspection, if you will remember, so colleagues from health, social care, as well as education, and all sorts of teams, parents, children, young people, have all fed into that document. And it's a sort of an honest reflection of where we think we are at any given point in time. So you'll see on the last page the sort of challenges and the things that we need to work on. We do have to continue with our self-evaluation form to make sure that it does reflect the situation that we're in now. One of the challenges for that, of course, is that you'll be well aware that we've had lots of changes of personnel, particularly more senior heads of service, senior managers, etc. And so, of course, with each new appointment, we need to obviously make sure that that person is well briefed as to where we stand in terms of Ofsted readiness. And that's not insubstantial task. Our work with health is quite a positive one. They have their own Ofsted prep group, if you like, but they also have a set of health champions who roll out the reforms to all of their colleagues across the 3 CCGs that we work with. And the work from the Healthy Child programme, which you'll know about, and the transformation plan have all been fed into and linked to the SEND reforms. So Thomas Brailsford, who is the Commissioner for both of those things, is heavily involved in the inspection as well, and is on the SEND strategy group, which oversees all of this work. So we have positive developments and relationships with colleagues in health, and we are making progress. That's not to say we don't have further progress to make. Of course we do. And we have plans. We know where the progress is that we need to make. We need to continue to work with our managers in social care for some of the reasons I explained earlier, that there have been changes to staff, and that, of course, has made some aspects of the work more challenging. And as new staff come in, it's about making sure that they understand what their responsibilities are in relation to children with special educational needs. And of course, the other part of the work is to work with our schools and settings. They are aware of this inspection. I think probably it's fair to say that if you look at reports up and down the country of local authorities that have been inspected, they pretty much all say that schools and settings and the education side of this, the people perhaps who are most up to speed with the reforms, the SEND reforms, with health and social care, perhaps not quite so up to speed as education, and that is most certainly a national trend. You can see it in any letter that you read, outcome letter. So we have a set of SENCO champions across our schools and settings and our post-16 settings as well as early years, who work very closely with us and with all schools, and there's been some really positive outcomes from that and the way in which they have helped develop our approach to meeting the needs of children and young people with special educational needs. And that work is continuing. The thing I haven't included in here, because I think we've covered it in prior briefings, is our ongoing relationship with parents. Our local forum is PCAN, Parents of Children with Additional Needs, and they have been involved in the development of this work from the outset. They are on the SEND strategy group, which is our most strategic group. We have 2 parent representatives on that. They come to the integrated commissioning group, and they are on every work stream that is linked to this. Capacity for them can sometimes be an issue as well, but it is our absolute commitment that they are involved and fully involved. And we have a very honest and sometimes challenging relationship with the trustees of PCAN. And obviously we will absolutely continue in that relationship with them. One thing that you'll see from the bottom bullet point, our SEN, Assessment and Commissioning Team, SENACT, as written there, what the reforms has shown us is that we need to look at the capacity of SENACT. We have more children now coming through with an education, health and care plan than we did prior to the reforms in 2014. This was anticipated, but perhaps it was hard to anticipate the degree to which it would be the case. And we are now looking with the DCS at how we can increase the capacity of that team to enable them to respond in a more timely fashion to those parents and children who are needing further intervention. So those are our main areas of both challenge and strength, really, in relation to this inspection.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the report was brief. I agree with that. I thought there would have been a lot more information with this in order for us to give it the consideration that it requires, I think. So that was slightly disappointing, and I'm sure some panel members share that frustration. Can I ask, before I take comments and questions from panel members, just I've got a number of different questions. Just on the high needs review, could you provide some more details on that and what's involved?
So the High Needs Review has allocated £1.3 million of capital spend to our local authority, and we have to let them know how we intend to spend that money in 3 tranches. However, that is one part of it. It's the main part for the DFE. What we have done is carry out a consultation, a very far-reaching consultation with parents, carers, children, young people, everybody really, that took place up until December. And we have pulled together all of the outcomes from that. So we've looked at all of our data that show the pressures on schools and settings and services moving forward in terms of the numbers of children, but also the complexity of need, which is increasing. And we were intending to have a visioning day last Thursday, but unfortunately, of course, the weather rather put paid to that. But from this visioning day, we've shared all of the data that we've gathered, all of the feedback from parents, of which there has been a lot, all of the data, all of the reports that have come through from various groups, with a view to saying, right, here are our challenges if we want to truly meet the needs of these children. And they will not come as a surprise. Workforce development, funding, specialist support have all been sort of highlighted as challenges to meet ever-increasing levels of need. And the Visioning Day, really, with, as I said, a cross-section of all of our partners, some councillors were coming to that as well, was to say, right, collectively, what are we going to do about this then? Because it's not, they are our children. We need to be able to manage their needs effectively within Kirklees wherever possible, and not to have to pay to send them somewhere else for their education, to keep them within their own community. We are going to reschedule that Visioning Day before Easter, because I think it's absolutely the crucial part of the High Needs Review, that we have a common understanding across all partners as to what our challenges are, and then a common understanding about some creative ways as to how we might better meet need moving forward. The outcome of that, when it happens, will be a strategy and an underpinning action plan, which will form the basis of the work that we do moving forward, and will certainly feed into the inspection.
Any questions from panel members? Dale?
You obviously learned a great deal from the consultation, but why was the consultation necessary? Would you like me to repeat the question? Okay. You obviously learnt a great deal from the consultation, but why was the consultation necessary?
We were required to carry out a consultation as a part of the High Needs Review, so they were very explicit in their instructions, the DFE, and we were required to carry out a consultation, and from that determine how we were going to spend our capital fund. We made the consultation more far-reaching than that, to give people the opportunity to really tell us what they felt would improve the system. And we had a huge amount of feedback from parents, much of it very positive, I have to say. Parents who were very happy with the way that their children's needs were being met, felt that their child was thriving in whichever school they happened to attend. But it's also given us lots of information, which we knew it would, and we've used it not just for the per capital fund, but to really inform what we're doing going forward.
Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chair. I think two people have already mentioned this, that it's a brief note. It's a briefing note. So I don't know how we can draw much conclusions from this, to be quite honest with you. I don't get too heavily involved, apart from being, when this comes to the full council or whatever, or when we get into individuals, to be quite honest with you. So I don't know how I can draw any conclusions as to what's actually happening with this note. I have to say, and you said it yourself, regarding data, I would have expected far more data and statistics in here, so as we can draw a conclusion as to what is actually happening. I personally didn't know about this review that was going on, probably my fault, but there is obviously going to be drivers that bring these reviews on, and what the issues are, and any proposals, whether it's an interim report with more information or more data. I don't want to go to a conclusion as yet, obviously, because you're nowhere near the end, but I think it's for us to understand this. That's not what scrutiny is it? It's a page and a half of nothing, really. I apologise. It's not a criticism of you. I just think that it does show a little bit of, I don't know, not lack of understanding.
The data pack is actually available because the High Needs Review report came to Cabinet about 2 weeks ago.
20th of February.
20th of February, and that had the appendices on that had the data pack in it. All of the feedback, there was a complete breakdown of everything everybody had said, plus our summary of what the main themes were, and that's what we've used really to try and fashion our visioning day coming up. So we have a very comprehensive data pack, as I said, on the system at the moment, which lets you know where all the pressures are in Kirklees, really ages, types of need, types of complexity, etc. And as I said, that does link into this report as well, this preparation for Ofsted 2.
Thank you. I think you're right in terms of the brevity of the report. So I wonder whether there's some real opportunities for Scrutiny to be involved in helping us to prepare. In the respect of, obviously, an inspection could come at any time, and as Mandy said, it's an iterative process, and I wonder whether there's an opportunity where we could, I don't know, Chair, whether it's with yourself or otherwise, in terms of being able to heavily involve Scrutiny in helping us improve our preparations.
Chair, can I just come back on that one, please, if you don't mind? And I think that's an extremely good idea. And I'll tell you why, because you're better airing it in something like this and us being prepared for other things that come along than us actually not knowing anything about it and people asking questions of us about it. And I think if you want to do that, I'm quite happy for us to get involved in that sort of work.
Councillor Light.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support Councillor Kearns' what he's just raised. But my point is different to that. What I expected to see here was some idea from the service about what they expected to get from this review. Now, given the history, I would like to have seen a very open, honest approach in terms of basically saying to us at Scrutiny, this is where we are, this is what we are, and this is what we expect to see, they expect us to be looking at. I don't feel we're getting that. I almost feel that we're getting, dare I say it, the old style, closed doors. Let's hope we can get through this review without anything being found out we don't want to be found out. Well, I'm not sure that's healthy for A, the council, and B, the service, and in particular young people as a whole. So I'd like to see a change of approach.
The CEF is very clear about where our strengths and weaknesses lie, and that's a document that can be shared, taken with the fact that it's a work in progress. And one thing to point out is that this inspection, you don't get a judgment. So it's not like other inspections in the sense that you're good or requires improvement or whatever. There is no judgment. You just get a letter. It's a narrative of where they think your strengths and weaknesses lie. About a third of local authorities that have been inspected so far have been required to write an action plan, but that's as far as there is any judgment at all. So it's quite difficult to talk about it in terms of being good or requires improvement, because that's not the framework that we're working to. Having said that, we do know where our strengths and weaknesses lie, and the CEF is there for anybody who wants to look at it, but it's quite a detailed document and would probably require me to sit down with you and explain really how it worked, and there's absolutely no problem with that at all.
Come back, Chair. If John's suggesting we bring that strengths and weaknesses document here, then I think that's a really sensible suggestion, because I'm not deliberately being cynical, but I think we're right to be cynical, that we've seen a lot of strengths and weaknesses, and certainly last year the previous body to this saw a lot of suggestions of strengths and weaknesses coming out of children's services, and they weren't always as frank as I would have liked them they should have been. I think I'll leave it at that, but I think it's, we need to be sharing things with this scrutiny panel, and if it needs to be in private to do that, I think that's a legitimate thing to do. and I think we need to be upfront and straight with it.
Thank you for those comments. I think that's really helpful. I think what might be helpful is if we could issue panel members with the CEF initially. Alongside, there's been an evaluation of inspections today and where there have been common themes, and that might be a really useful tool to the panel members to help to perhaps give us some challenge back. And I wonder if we might be able to do that and then report at the next publicly available meeting, so maybe a private session, and follow that up, because absolutely the reason that we've talked very clearly about the high needs review, it's all very well people looking at the here and now, but it's how we're planning strategically together for the future based on the basic need of youngsters, etc. So it's continuing the work. It's a snapshot at a piece of time, but it's also what are we doing moving forwards, and now we're getting that collective understanding. Because I think you're right, we want exactly the same thing. We want great provision locally that are meeting youngsters' needs, and those needs vary and are getting ever more complex. So I think, like I said, I think the opportunity for Scrutiny to put a bit of challenge back would be very helpful, so we'd welcome that.
Special education needs was on the work programme from the very beginning. It was something that we felt very strongly about. It was also put forward by Steve Walker as an area that we should be focusing on. And I think that's why there's a degree of frustration among panel members about the lack of information for us to be able to scrutinise and for us to consider where exactly we are with everything. Taking everything as it is, we would just go away thinking, well, everything is okay, a few little challenges, but we're none the wiser. I'm certainly none the wiser from this or from understanding where exactly we are. Are there any other comments? Or
That's about this, is it the SAF document?
It's the CEF, it's self-evaluation form.
Self-evaluation. How big is that document?
It's quite big.
Well, you know what I'm going to ask now, don't
Yeah.
you? You know, is there not a précis of that?
I could write down we've got a front cover which is a very short précis. I mean, I'm more than happy to sit with all of you and go through the CEF. I think if I just gave it to you as a document, I know that when we've done that with other people, they've taken a bit of time to get their heads around it. Yeah, that's no problem with that.
any questions or comments? Yeah.
Just thinking that through, and I think it would be useful to have a summary of what other reports have come back to. I think that's helpful from a theme perspective. I'm cynical of you know, the main document. Really, what we need to know, what are the key points within that, the key strengths and weaknesses. But actually, I'm also interested to know is what's good look like. So I really like to see, you know, a report or what the inspectors would say about a council which they think is doing a good job. Now, I can't remember whether Bradford got a good report for this or it was something else.
It was something else.
Yeah,
it's quite hard to answer that question actually, because we obviously, as you can imagine, scrutinise all of the letters as they come out, and there are some common themes. And the Council for Disabled Children wrote a report about that, and I'll make sure that's circulated to all of you that give very general themes, but actually the reports, the letters that come back are all quite different, and strengths in one place aren't necessarily another, and it's very difficult when you weren't there and you don't know the context, because it's just a narrative and there isn't an actual judgment next to it. It's really quite hard to glean much of any use from those individual reports. But as I said, there is an overarching one. So, for example, it says things like the relationship with parents and carers obviously figures large in all of them, and it tends to either be good or bad. But again, it depends on the level of perhaps dissatisfaction among a group of parents. And it's interesting because in some reports you can see that a very, very small number of parents have obviously registered their unhappiness about something, but it has still made it to the final report. But in other letters you can see that a larger group of parents did, and it made it through to the final report. So sometimes it's quite difficult to tell what was actually happening at that time. Obviously, the attainment and progress of the children in the area is very important. Either they're making good progress or they're not. There's always a section in it about health and their contribution to it, about commissioning arrangements. And we have a view on all of those things. We know where we are, where our good practice is, and where we need still to improve. And schools and their Ofsted judgments, their ability to meet the needs of those children, again, we have a view about that too. We do have a view, and it is all lineated in our CEF, which I can share with you with absolutely no problem at all.
Yes, Dale.
Following Councillor Light's point, do you actually have your own template for what good looks like?
We have our own template for our self-evaluation form. And yes, of course, we know whether we think something is good or not, but we are judging it on our own. There isn't an Ofsted framework like there is, say, in a school inspection, which would tell you good looks like this, outstanding looks like that. There is not that mechanism here. But of course, we know mostly from parent feedback and from the way in which children thrive or otherwise in school, we know whether something is good or not, and that is what we use to base our judgments. But we do have, in some ways, attainment and progress, you can tell. It's very clear whether children are making good progress or not. A lot of the other areas, it's more, some of it you can actually count up numbers. So, for example, we are judged on how many of our children have converted from an old statement of special needs to an education, health and care plan. Those are numbers, we can count them. And the deadline for getting all of those transferred is the end of this month, and we are pretty certain that we're going to meet that deadline. So we could say then that we have done that, and that would be deemed as being good. There's another one that you have to be able to say how many of those children get their education, health and care plan within statutory timescales. And our last analysis of that showed that we were above average. So there are certain things where it's very easy to say, yes, we are or we are not good. In other ways, though, for example, our local offer, our Kirklees local offer on the website, we have to be able to judge whether we consider it to be effective or not. That's much harder. I mean, you can say how many people have accessed it, and you can tell how many times they've revisited it, but to say whether or not it's effective is more, you have to go out and ask people. You have to go and see whether they think it is. And interestingly, in terms of the letters that have been written so far, probably the biggest common theme is the lack of effectiveness of the local offer almost across the board, that parents perhaps aren't as informed about it as Ofsted would like. You know, parents are asked and they don't know about it, for example. But that is a more qualitative judgment than some of the others, and therefore it's subject to opinion.
Can I just, as we're talking about the self-evaluation form, you said it's ever-changing, it's developing as we go along. And so on reflection on that, what are the areas where you know there needs to be improvements?
Shall I start with the areas where I think we're doing well? Or do you just want to hear the others? I can do both. I can do both quite easily. I'm quite happy
to hear the positives, but if we start with the
start
areas...
Okay then. So we have met our statutory timescales. We have met our timescales, we think. I mean, we're not at the 31st of March yet, so, you know, we've still got 3 or 4 weeks to go. But we think we're going to get there. So we will have converted all of our statements into education, health and care plans, which has been no mean feat, let me tell you. It's been a massive undertaking. What we now need to focus on is the quality of those plans, because all local authorities, and this is a common factor, if you read across reports, they all say this, it's been such a huge job to transfer them from one system to another that in some aspects we now need to focus on the quality of those plans, and that is something that we have an action plan to do. So that's one thing that we will be focusing on once the transfers have all been completed. It will not surprise you to know that we have a lot of work that we need to do with social care to make sure, because this is an area inspection, and it'll be education, health, social care, all of those aspects will be inspected. And I think, as I've sort of more or less said in this brief report, some parts of that are further along than others. So we're reasonably confident that our schools know what they're doing. You know, they all understand what their responsibilities are within the legislation. We know that they would see some good practice if they went out and looked in some of our schools. Health, we know that they have their health champions, they are fully engaged in the agenda. We have a designated medical officer. Some local authorities have been criticised for not having one. We have one. And so we know that we have got some good practice within health. We know that we have a waiting list for autism diagnoses, and you'll be aware of that probably from previous pieces of information that have certainly been reported elsewhere. And we know we have a plan to try and do something about that. We do need to focus on social care and their contribution both to the statutory process around education, health and care plans, but to wider things as well. So by that I mean their contribution to the plans themselves, their involvement with those plans, the transition of those young people then through to adulthood. So we have got quite a lot of work that we need to do around those areas.
On point 5, you speak about the new post holders and making sure they're aware of their responsibilities in relation to the inspection. Are they aware of their responsibilities now?
They're aware as they come into post. So what we do is when we have new senior leaders, the first thing I do is arrange to meet them and to go through the CEF with them, to explain to them where we need their contribution. There are still some gaps in the CEF because of the difficulties there have been in staffing, and that is something that we're very, very aware of. I'm meeting with colleagues tomorrow morning to try and to address some of that. But it is an ongoing situation at the moment because, of course, there have been a lot of new appointments very recently which will help significantly, but we're not entirely there yet. And I would say that is probably the biggest challenge for me at the moment.
So I think just like everything else, I mean, the stability now around senior leadership has been further stabilised just recently, as Mandy's reflected. And I think the key is it's not just knowing where we are and what we're good at and need to improve on, but it is the planning for undertaking that. So I think that's as well as the self-evaluation, it's the action planning. So I think that for me is the most important thing of the work that we're doing collaboratively, is that we know what we need to do and we've got plans in place to enable that, rather than waiting to be inspected and them to perhaps issue us with an action plan. And that's learning what's going on around the rest of the country and understanding ourselves.
Are you able to provide any details about the number of post holders that are yet to be filled?
I'm not sure we're able to do that today, Councillor Burke, sorry. I think just to sort of say that there were various head of service roles across children's services that were to be recruited to, and I'm pleased to say that successful appointments were made just not last week, the week before, so those post holders will be able to hit the ground running. That's really positive.
Okay, any further questions or comments from panel members? Okay, thank you for coming and presenting this to us and taking the feedback from panel members. I think our next meeting is 16th of April, so that would be a useful time if that is convenient.
Can I just say at this point, I would welcome the opportunity to go through the CEF with you. I don't know that this is perhaps the best forum to do it, because you'll all have a big document in front of you, and I think there's a lot of referencing that needs to take place, but obviously I'll be guided by you in that. It would be a very detailed discussion, more of a working document, and probably cross-referencing and back and forth and so on.
After this meeting, we'll put forward the issues that we want to look at and the different areas that we want to cover, and taking that on board. But if you could be available 16th of April for our next meeting, we could look at incorporating that into that meeting, depending on the agenda workload for that. Otherwise, we could schedule a further meeting to go through that in more detail if necessary. But I would like as much information as possible to be taken in public, unless there's a reason for it to be in private. Okay? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 7 is the visit to duty and advice. That was hampered by the weather, so that didn't take place. Item 8 was the visit to the children's home Woodlands in Linley. This took place. You should have received a copy of the notes from that visit. Would Councillor Bellamy or Dale, would you like to feed back on any observations following the visit?
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was an extremely valuable visit. I felt that everybody we spoke to was extremely open. I think that the review that we have in front of us covers most of the points, bar one. One of the things that occurred to me was that the leader of the home said that when a child arrived with them, then a social worker would do an assessment of the needs of that child before any therapeutic treatment could be put into place for that child. Now, it occurred to me that once a child has once an order has been made for the child to be placed into care, I think, did you say it was 26 weeks from the time of that order being made to their being placed?
It's 26 weeks from the start of proceedings to when the proceedings should finish.
But it's, to me, it's axiomatic that any child who has been through a court process, being placed into care, has problems which are going to need treatment. Why do they have to wait until after being placed into care, after an assessment, before they can have a treatment? And I remember that the head of the home actually said that that was one of the most frustrating things for them, that it took so long before any therapeutic treatment plans were available for the children. And I personally didn't understand why these programs could not be put in place before the child arrived. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll agree. It was very, very useful visit, and the staff and the children we spoke to all seemed sort of happy and with everything that was going off, apart from, as Dale said, the therapy side of it. It just seemed such a long time that they did have to wait, and that did also worry me, you know. When a child goes into care, obviously there is something wrong. I mean, without saying that the child's probably broken in some way and is going to need some sort of therapy, and I do think that needs to be ASAP. I don't think they can wait. And obviously taking so long on CAMS. Is the waiting list as long for CAMS as it is for, you know, anybody else that wants to access CAMS? I'd like to know if it could be somehow shortened.
On the last point about CAMS, what was interesting was that they had a named person for everything from sexual health, alcohol abuse, drug abuse. They had a named person available, but they did not have a named CAMS worker available. And that seemed to me to be the one person that they really did need a named person for, and it was the one that they didn't have.
Thank you for that. I think I agree with the issues that were raised around therapies and in particular CAMS and the work that needs to take place there. We will have somebody from corporate parenting come and speak to us at the next available time, and that we'll put that on the agenda so that we can follow up the issues arising from that visit to the children's home.
Yeah, I've actually invited Steve Combe to attend the meeting on the 16th of April and to provide a report, detail us with the questions. I think you're going to have a private briefing and then bring to the meeting some of the questions that you raised around some of the short-term issues, long-term issues. So hopefully they'll be attended on the 16th of April.
Okay. Any questions from any panel members on the visit to the children's home?
Yeah, I think I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about the relationship between social care and health, that it could be better. What's the situation at the moment? What improvements do they think would be useful for the home?
Yeah, that's one of the items that we've put on, so hopefully we'll be able to address those at the next one. Any further questions or comments? Okay, moving on to item 9 is the work programme. Just going back to item 7, the visit to the duty and advice, we will rearrange that and send an email around to try and get another date for that one. So 9 is the Children's Scrutiny work programme. Do you want to go through?
Yeah, if you look at the work programme, one is just an ongoing issue with the improvement plan. That's obviously still going ahead with Councillor Bellamy now attending the improvement board on behalf of the panel. So you'll be updating us regularly, won't you, on the as it comes forward.
I've attended one meeting which certainly took some catching up on. Paperwork's about that thick, as I'm sure Councillor Kendrick would agree. I think their next meeting is tomorrow, actually, and they seem to be concentrating on front door issues tomorrow, so that's about all I can really give you at the moment, but I'll be able to feed back after tomorrow as well.
Performance management will come to the next meeting. That may come informally to the next meeting, so they can give a little bit more detail to the panel. Again, corporate parenting, that will come with Steve Combe, who's hopefully attending the next meeting on the 16th of April. He has been briefed about what should be included in his report. And also, as I say, Councillor Burke is having an informal briefing with him so they can update him exactly what it is that the panel are looking for following that visit. Just moving down to the elective home education, that panel is ongoing now with a plan of action as to how that's going to be moved forward, and they're meeting following this meeting, so they will bring regular updates back to the meeting. So for the next panel meeting, we'll have an update on the visit to duty and advice, which I'll hopefully organise for between now and the next meeting. There'll be the SEND report and the report from corporate parenting, performance information and some financial monitoring as well.
Okay, thank you. So the next meeting is on Monday the 16th of April at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much for attending.